Hi everybody, Rabbi David Foreman back with you. I asked you, how is it that we're going to try to understand this Rashi? Why is this Rashi just not talking about the most trivial thing in the world in mentioning how many coats Joseph was stripped of? And I think the answer is that what Rashi is doing here is reminding us, kind of with a wink and a nod, of a law later on in the Torah. Right? Think about it for a moment. All the other brothers had one coat, and Joseph has two coats. Why would Joseph have two coats? Well, let's think about that. Why would Joseph have two coats? Or, let me put it to you this way, what law later on in the Torah does this remind you of? So the answer is right over here in Dvarim Chaf Aleph, Deuteronomy 21. This is the law of the man with children from two wives. Of course, the law which we're talking about in Hebrew is the law of Pishnayim. I'm just going to write it in Hebrew over here. And Pishnayim over here means the double portion, and this is the law that has to do with inheritance. The law that a Bechor, right, that's where we had before, you can even spell it with a Vav or without a Vav, that a Bechor, a firstborn child, receives a double portion in his father's estate. I'm just going to read through this law with you, and just going to show you the part right over here. It's just toward the end of the section of the text. The details we'll talk about in a moment, but the basic idea is that the father has to acknowledge the right of the Bechor, whether he likes it or not, to this share of a double portion, everything that he has. And it seems that that is what Rashi is referring to over here, right? All the other children had one coat, but no, not Joseph. Hu shehosif lo aviv yoter al achav. He had a second coat. It seems to be this reference to this idea of Pishnayim. It's as if the second coat, the special coat, is Yaakov's way of suggesting that Yosef, you in fact are my Bechor, my firstborn child. Now, it's possible, you might say, I hear the skeptic in you saying, well, I don't know, maybe that's a little bit of a stretch. It could be that Rashi's referring to the law of a Bechor, that Joseph has a second coat over here, and also could just be a coincidence. Maybe Rashi likes talking about trivia. Maybe Rashi's into just mentioning things like little details about how many coats Joseph lost for no good reason. I mean, it could be. I can't disprove that, but I think I can suggest quite strongly that this is actually not a coincidence. That in fact the links between the Joseph story and Joseph's second coat and these laws over here in Deuteronomy and Dvarim are exceedingly strong. And I want to just show you how strong they are, and what I'm going to show you is actually pretty mind-blowing, so kind of fasten yourself in. Before I show it to you though, I just want to remind you of an idea which we talked about earlier. It's an idea that I referred to, or really a methodological tool, which I think the Torah uses, which I called intertextuality. We used this earlier to talk about this mystery of these Akedah parallels, these parallels that seem to link the story of the sale of Joseph to the binding of Isaac, which we still have to come back to explain. And right now we're going to have another quick adventure into the fascinating world of intertextuality. This idea, again, that the Torah is in many ways kind of the original internet, that there are these links that seem to pervade the Torah, which take the central idea, and there's these various different expressions of it. And the way that you see these hyperlinks kind of coming to life is that you've got these two stories, right? And you have these various different elements in these stories. And if you just chart out the elements one by one, you start seeing these fascinating connections where this other story seems to have these echoes of these kinds of elements. We talked about this being a kind of sign, seemingly, that story 2 is kind of commenting on story A in all of these different kinds of ways. So you can't really understand story 1 without story 2. And you look for words, phrases, or ideas in story 1 that it seems to be echoing in story 2, seem to establish these hyperlinks, these kind of connections between the two stories. So what I want to do with you in our next video is come back to this section of text which we've begun to look at, Deuteronomy 21, Dvarim Chaf Aleph, where we have this law of the man with children from two wives, which is the source in the Torah for the idea that a Bechor gets Pishnayim, that a firstborn is entitled to a double portion of everything the father has. We theorized, so far just a theory, that perhaps we're hearing the echoes of this, at least in Rashi, in the story of Joseph, that Joseph is being stripped of not one coat but two coats. Maybe it's a reference to this Pishnayim. Could we sort of prove it? To prove it, what I want to do is show you that if we take a very close look at this section of text, just 3 verses over here, we're going to find that this just opens up to us in a three-dimensional way if we are sensitive to the intertextual references in here. So what I want to challenge you to do is go through these 3 sentences and ask yourself, play this game, where have we heard these words before? And when I say where have we heard these words before, I don't just mean words. I mean words on the one hand, ideas, right? Any kind of thing which piques your interest, which sort of seems out of place, and you say, gee, I kind of heard that before. And do those connections establish any kind of pattern? Is there some other text which, as you go through these 3 verses, you just see, I don't know, I just keep on getting these sort of constant reminders of that other text. What are those reminders? What is that other text? See if you can piece together any of this, and then we'll come back and talk about it.